Welcome to another episode of Infralytics. My name is Shankar, and today we are going to talk about social engineering. Is your small, medium enterprise ready to take on this challenge? With John Britton, Director of Operations at Corvid Cyber Defense. Hi, John. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role, kind of your what you guys do, what kind of customers you work with, and so on.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So my name is John Britton. I'm the Director of Security Operations for Corvid Cyber Defense, formerly known as Workers Networks. We are an MSSP providing end-to-end cybersecurity to the SMB, SME environments, providing everything from firewall, technology tools, management of that. And then obviously on top of that, we have a 24/7 security operations center that will manage and monitor and respond accordingly to any alerts that we do see in the environment.
So when you focus on SME, SMB business, how do you see the threats that are, or kind of this challenges that these organizations are facing these days? How has it changed from what they were maybe let's say a few years ago or a year ago? How have you seen this evolve?
Yeah, so that's quite an interesting question because, 5-6 years ago, if somebody wanted to go steal some money, they would go to a bank. Whereas today, the way that the internet has connected everybody and all businesses are now operationalized to being always on, every organization is targetable. And we find that especially this year, the biggest trend and threat to any organization is social engineering. And it may only be, trying to entice them out of a few $100s worth of what would be classified as Bitcoin, but they are now being targeted and very heavily. And almost to the point that now enterprise level environments aren't being as targeted as much because the industry has changed to a level that these enterprise organizations have to have the right compliance and technology in place. So it means them as a target aren't necessarily valuable. So the SMB, SME, we support anything from a 2-man organization all the way up to 3,000. So the 2-3-man shop where they haven't got the technology, the time, or the people to support them are actually now becoming more vulnerable, thus more successfully targetable. So you've actually seen that there's been a massive pivot of larger organizations being targeted to now the SMB, where they may not earn they only may earn hundreds of thousands of dollars, but now because of the $100, $200 ransom that they can get out of them, are now more of a successful target. So this is why obviously we're in the market, because we want to make cybersecurity available to these organizations at the same standard as what an enterprise level should be implemented into their organization.
That's right. So these organizations don't have the bandwidth of the enterprise, and so they need whatever help they can to kind of prevent these threats to their business, right?
No, exactly. So I was just going to say, one of the things with organizations of how they're built today, you have the niche like 10-man companies where you have 10 people who truly just do their piece, their legal practice, their financial practice. And as businesses are developed now, they're developed on managed services, not just on IT or cyber, but all other entities of the businesses now are being pushed out to, I don't have HR, so I go to this company. I don't have finance, I go to this company, IT and cyber. So it makes it a lot easier for these companies to do this and obviously be sort of the same standard as an enterprise. But again, the more you reach out to these other organizations, the higher the chances of your footprint and your data that's valuable to your company of being stolen, because it's now in multiple places at once.
So you talked about social engineering. So what kind of common techniques are being used by the hackers and the unsavory elements? What kind of techniques are they using? Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so in 2017, 2018, the biggest buzzword was phishing. Everybody knows what phishing is today. And what we have found is the techniques has changed. So a phishing email would be something simple with a malicious attachment or a URL that would take you to a website and try to either entice you out of your credentials that would lead to like a business email compromise, or it may take you to a website in hopes that your network security isn't as strong, and you will then download a malicious file that will open up a backdoor. Now, with the evolution of technology and how people's stature towards cybersecurity has changed, that type of attacks have become a lot harder for them to get through. But what we find is the biggest thing that obviously really affects any organization is the people, because people can make mistakes and people can be manipulated out of things. So what we, corporate cyber defense, have to deal with quite a lot is emails that do somewhat bypass technological security devices. That, you know, it may just be an email saying, hey, it's me, the CEO. Can you go to Target? Can you go to the shop and get me a voucher for X, Y, and Z? And the only thing that we're obviously able to see in that email is just the signature says there that the CEO. Such fundamentally basic email, but not necessarily like anybody who's watching this will think, I'm never going to fall for that, because you probably won't. But there's one person who will, and that one person will send them the voucher for $500 worth of code and, you know, money, and then basically they've then enticed them out of it. Other things that we do see is data leaks that maybe 2-3 years old they have some credentials that are related to you. It may be an older password or your email, but they're able to set up an offsite exchange that sends you an email from your email and says, hey, I'm in your email, I'm in your computer, I have manipulated the device so that I have physical access to see what you're doing via your webcam, and I've been monitoring you over the last couple of days. If you do not want me to release this video, you know, pay me X amount of money to my wallet. And we see that a lot. We actually saw 3 yesterday that were all the same, complete different organizations, but, you know, they all went through, they all got successfully to the end user, and the end user's like, well, what do I do from this? And unfortunately, you know, because there's nothing behind it, there's not really much you can do other than to ignore it. But when you start talking about a cybersecurity framework, you don't just talk about the technology and the monitoring, you have to have continuous awareness and training. And that's where, you know, that education to the end user, educating them that these type of things do happen. And you can push them to me to investigate, and it takes me all of 3 seconds to say it came from Central America, Africa, it came from India, or wherever. You know, it allows them to help it. And then obviously from my side, I can then jump on and put a preventative posture onto the technology to make sure that never happens again. But obviously these social engineering attacks are just so basic and simple, it makes it very hard for technology to be able to do anything without, you know, us putting too many preventative rules in and impacting the business.
So in most cases, it all starts with education, basically educating the teams, or educating the people, the users in the community, in the company, and then kind of putting in after the fact that you're going to put in the rules to prevent future.
Education is extremely critical to any organization. We found that we've changed our methodology on how we do it. So we used to do, you know, one educational 1 hour long presentation once a year, but we found that the micro segmentation learning is a lot better, where we do once a month a 3 to 5 minute video covering sort of the new threat that everyone's seeing, and always keeping in the back of the mind that if they do see something that is a little bit bizarre, think about it. And then ultimately, we're here, we're available, we're 24/7. Send us the information and we can investigate it. Because even if we do spend 30 minutes and find out something legit, that is a little bit better than actually, you know, us spending no time on it, you getting compromised, and then us having to spend 2 hours having to fix the environment and then do a full assessment of actually what data has been impacted. So yeah, continuous education and also availability from a security team or IT practitioner, you know, are the 2 fundamental basic things that we need on top of the technology.
So do you see any kind of difference in the patterns or kind of threats facing small organization versus medium enterprise, like say maybe 1,000 people or so? Do you see some differences in terms of what kind of threats they face and what
the larger the organization, the more increase of external threats that we do see. The smaller organizations, a lot of the threats that we are actually responding to are user created. It's not necessarily that they're doing it on purpose or they're being manipulated out or anything. They may actually just be doing something completely legitimate, like going to a URL to a website to buy something. but because that website has been compromised externally, they're starting to generate a lot of traffic, but the less the organization, the less the traffic, so the less the threat. As soon as you do start scaling up to 1,000 plus, we do see a lot of external vulnerability scanning coming from foreign national countries. You do see a lot of more internal traffic that may be anomalies that are mistakes or misconfiguration, but obviously they still need to have investigation. So you have a lot of scripts that run in the back end where they may be tied to credentials that, expired. So all of a sudden we're now seeing internal to internal brute forcing. After we've done the whole evaluation, there's nothing to it. It's just a mishap of a password. Once updated, we're good to go. But, the lower organizations don't really have them types of systems. But then the larger organizations also have a higher footprint. They may be hosting their own exchange. They may have multiple servers offline or in the environment or different locations that, a vulnerability scan to them and having a patch management project is a lot more important versus the smaller organization where you're just talking a firewall and, a switch to route everybody to the computers and to their VoIP phones. And outside of that, they haven't really got anything else other than maybe a printer.
So in terms of from your security operations perspective, how have you, what has changed from how security operations used to be in the past versus how you have to deal with the present day threats in your organization from a day-to-day activities perspective to the technologies that you use, and etc. So how has it changed?
So the buzzwords today are machine learning, artificial intelligence, which these are very high standards to achieve. And, we're obviously working to get automation. We have machine learning we're working on because obviously the bigger beast to that. But, 5-6 years ago, you would have the technology in place that would be very standardized, and it may have been an IDS. It detects, it doesn't really do anything. Now, obviously, with the next generation firewalls, they have IPSs and they have external feeds coming in to be able to do correlation. So what we find nowadays is we're able to be a lot more reliant on the technology to do its job, and then to be able to enhance on top of that with additional API feeds and, external things that we're creating ourselves to do correlation. So what that means from an organization is, 5 years ago, you'd have to have a 30-man team to investigate every single piece of alerts that you see, because you're not necessarily putting preventative rules in place, mostly because you're kind of in fear if you don't understand what the organization is doing. So if you were to block something, all of a sudden you might have the marketing director phone you up and say, my system is not working. Whereas today, because we have the availability to do, east-west, full network understanding, WAN, LAN, everything, you can make an architecture of the environment and understand how the traffic flows enough to the point that you can pinpoint to application-based traffic and say, well, I like that, but I don't like that. So, traditionally you have to have a detect and response, whereas today you can prevent it first. As long as you build out the architecture and the understanding of the organization, that you can prevent things first. So, Palo Alto and Cisco have definitely been pushing a piece where they want to have like a zero trust zone in the network. What we try to do is make the whole network zero trust. Negative security posture was, you go down the route saying, I don't like. And before you finished it, you've got a list of 1,000 things that you don't like. But then you've got anomalies of things that you're just not sure on. Whereas today, because the technology works so well, you really can understand everything that is in the organization and then go, well, let me do positive. I need these 10 things to work. I don't mind these working, but the rest of them, I'm not sure. And then we can spend our time working out what the rest are and then build a posture that is positive. So it takes you from being a detect and response to actually now you're preventing things from actually happening. So the social engineering phishing attacks, we're able to build a posture to stop them. So it stops it from getting to the network. It stops it from getting to the endpoint. Whereas traditionally, you may have seen the email come through. You may have seen the anomalous network traffic downloading files. And you may have been lucky that if it wasn't a 0-day, there was a signature on your endpoint. But now, today, the posture in the email security is probably stopped it. If not, the network has enough feeds into it and correlation in the SIM to be able to prevent it. And if it doesn't, obviously the machine learning algorithm that we're using on the endpoint has detected it. And then what we're able to do is very quickly, in the matter of minutes, do a whole reverse engineering of how it got there, and then posturally change it to harden the environment. Whereas before, the correlation, it may have been you had 5 teams doing the same thing, and they're not talking together, and the information that they have doesn't correlate. So it becomes kind of like, well, we think we've done it, but we're not sure until the next time. Whereas we can be more aggressive and say, I have blocked that. I have seen how it got through. I have then gone back and fixed it, where, we're spending, less than 30 minutes doing a whole investigation, whereas traditionally you're talking hours, maybe days to do the same thing.
That's great. So in terms of your stack and how you bring all this information together, is it easier now to bring all this information together in a single place, kind of correlate, or you still have to jump through the stuff to get to the information? How is it made your...
Yeah, so, I'm not saying 5 years ago specifically, but definitely my development of being true cybersecurity, especially in America. When I first started, if I wanted to look in the firewall, I went to the firewall. If I wanted to look at the endpoint, I had to log into the endpoint. Whereas now businesses have developed where they have these tools that are all synced together via a SIM, Security Event Incident Management tool, that allows all the data to be correlated into individual indices. And then we can layer on security on top of that to do event correlation where, for example, you see a URL in an email, but then you also see the URL in the proxy traffic. So there's a good chance that somebody received the email and they've clicked it. You can then obviously take the email tool is not designed to understand URLs as good as what a firewall is. So when we see the event in the firewall, what we can see is that was able to categorize it as malicious and block it. So we can then have that event correlation come to us extremely quickly and say, hey, this was blocked, and it was also seen in an email, which then puts my team, instead of having to look at the tier 1 kind of event singular investigation of the email and the firewall, they instantaneously, automatically are identified to an event that's correlated, that allows them to look at more of the tier 3, step 3, step 4 of the investigation, to now go back and go, who is this sender? What else has he sent? Is he legit? And is this a false positive? Is this something I need to do? So it has definitely allowed us to automate and, correlate a lot more data and actually have us investigating more critical events versus what we would traditionally do if there was an email event, there was a firewall event, and that's 2 different teams working it. Neither of them put 2 and 2 together. Whereas obviously now I have a single team that can utilize, one tool that brings in all the data and has the correlation around that.
Now, I want to take a step back, and you talked about automation, also the kind of the investigation approach, right? So what areas do you focus on automation like right now? And where do you still look at from a more manual investigation or investigative approach? But what are the things that you're focusing on automation?
So security operations are broken down into, I like to think, 4 tiers. A lot of other publications will say 3, where you have your tier 1 for single events. You have your tier 2 for event correlation, where you're seeing multiple tools. Tier 3, you're looking more at the hunting. And for me, tier 4 is kind of like the 11th man in the room, that he has to always go back and question to make sure everything's working. The tier 1 events now, because we can rely heavily on the tools, and you can spend the time when you're doing the implementation of the tools into the environment, you build out the posture that you agree that the technology is going to do the right thing. There are certain events that you can't really do too much about. When you're talking like window logs, the 4624 for the bad login events, can't really do too much about them because you can't block them, but you obviously want to be alerted when there's a mass amount of them. So you find that 90% of the traditional tier 1 events that, you had your analysts spending all their time responding to, fixing and mitigating, actually has the right policies and postures in place that they can't actually actionably go through. An example may be a critical severity signature detection that has a file associated with it. If I've got a major player like Palo Alto who's telling me that's bad, I'll agree, it's bad. So I don't want my guys dealing with that. So I can obviously automate the correlation of how the event's managed through that and come to the second phase where I'm actually looking at the event correlation. And that helps me from the organizational point of obviously reducing man hours, but ultimately have me concentrate on higher threats to the organization that actually have circumvented some security measures. Then the other flip side to that is obviously I'm running the organization to be researching it, but I need to create visualization that enables me as the organization to be able to physically see this. And obviously have it presented to me in a manner that I know how that needs to be. But also as a service provider, I also need to provide evidence to my clients. So once a week, they can go, okay, I completely agree with everything that you've blogged here. However, the one thing that I do disagree on is we have implemented this new policy and procedure to our organization that enables us to do that. But you, Corby Cyber Defense and Brokers Networks, were not involved or told about that. So here's a visual way for me to go, this is what you've done, and you can then feed me back information. So the report analytics now is a piece that, traditionally you may have had to spend hours in Excel and Word and create a nice fancy document. It needs to be streamlined and fast out the door. And you do find a lot of organizations, which we're obviously in the premise of doing, is trying to build compliance into reporting, where you have certain criteria and things that go in and find the information that specifically relate to whatever compliance you're going down. And not only does that help in compliance, you find a lot of security vendors now have to actually have that information pushed to them regularly. So obviously, I don't want to have to hire somebody who will constantly just have to churn over reports. So it means that I will have to rely on a tool that will automate the reporting and the visualization of the data so I can digest it, either for me as a security expert or to my client who doesn't really get security but needs to have a receipt of everything that they've seen in their environment.
That's great. So kind of taking a tiered approach to the automation and then focusing on the more higher value threats.
Yeah, so from the operational side, we want to put the easy wins to one side and concentrate on the more complex. Push people to the hunting side. Use your expertise to go find something that is anomalous, something that I can't specifically pinpoint. And then obviously from the reporting side, that has to be automated.
So, the security operations has to constantly evolve to face emerging threats. So where do you see this going to kind of the next generation? So what do you see as some of the things that you're looking to see in the next generation or looking to put in place for the next generation? What are your thoughts on that?
So it's interesting because it depends who you talk to. If you talk to an enterprise level company, the difficulties they have is finance. You talk to a company that has 500,000 endpoints, for them to turn around and say the technology needs to evolve really quickly is really hard because, for them to change technology, you're talking tens of millions of dollars. For us, obviously, one of the reasons why we're in the business is, a statistic I was reading earlier, they were saying in 2021, there's going to be 3.6 million deficits of security analysts to support the requirement of the US, which, I think is very luxurious as a statement, because truly what it's saying is every organization does need to have cybersecurity. And, if we add them all together, that means there should be about 3.6 million additional people on top of what we have today. So what we find that's going to happen is organizations are going to have it standardized that they have to have security as a 24/7 monitoring, data retention, policy assessments, and, regular vulnerability scanning, all that stuff. Larger organizations obviously probably have it in-house, but the problem and difficulties that they have is, like, if I wanted to change one of the technologies in my stack because I believe there was a better product out there to, respond to the next threat, which I don't know what that is yet, but when it comes, I have the flexibility to, within a month, change. Whereas at enterprise level, they can change, but then they've got to spend another $10 million and maintain the previous contract that they have, because I'm sure there'll be no get-out clause. So you find that what we're going to be having is a lot of the technology providers, in terms of the security providers, are going to have to be constantly retroactively jumping onto this machine learning and responding to other things where, they may be looking at the firewall, but they also may need to have a pivot onto the endpoint. So they've got a bit of correlation of event logs. So it's hard for me to determine what the next level would be. Otherwise, I could retire on the idea of how to resolve it. But retrosponsively, companies have to have a large posture or a better posture at cybersecurity to enable them to survive in this ultimately interconnected, flexible organizations that we work for today.
Well said, John. I mean, I think the kind of the agility that is needed to respond is critical, and especially when you don't know what is going to come what is going to be thrown at you coming.
Yep, especially with computers getting faster, we're only as quick as we can type. Whereas obviously, like I said, when we talked about the iteration of traditional technologies versus now, we can start to really heavily rely on it, which then enables me to take my tier ones into tier twos, and as an organization evolve and start looking at the machine learning where, we can do more deeper analysis and actually identify trends and anomalies that, just based on the tools that we have, we wouldn't be able to do.
That's great. Thank you, John. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and appreciate it. And thanks again. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Don't forget to subscribe and review us because we want to help other users like you improve their security, IT, and business operations. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, please visit www.skedler.com, that is spelled SKEDLER.com, where you can find tons of information about Elasticsearch reporting and alerting and Grafana reporting. You can also download a 21-day free trial with us and check out how you can simplify your SIM reporting and alerting with Skedler. Thank you again for joining us today. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you.